afternoon. Thank you for joining us today on the Binary Business Show. My name is Logan Edmonds. I'm CEO of Tabernacle Technology Solutions, and I am joined today by a special co-host. Isaac, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, sir?
Isaac Koenig, CEO of Care Technology Group.
Hey, so not often I get someone I can talk shop with 100%, so this is kind of cool. How you doing today, Isaac?
It's a pleasure being here. Exciting days.
How's the weather in New York? It's kind of temperate over here in Ohio.
It's getting there. Some days it's been mostly raining over the weekend, so I'm actually glad this past weekend it was nice. Hoping to get some nice weather again.
Nice. Well, today the big topic on the board is ransomware, which, ransomware, it's the gift that keeps on giving, right? Like, I don't want to be repetitive in the show, but literally it's like nonstop. So just for our viewers' sake, before we get started, let me go ahead and share the article we're referencing today. So referencing articles from bleepingcomputer.com, and it's Ace Hardware says 1,202 devices were hit during a cyber attack as of November 2nd, 2023. What did you think about this, first off?
So to get back to what you said, it's a gift that keeps on giving. I feel it's the reason for that is people don't take it seriously. So it keeps on happening. But if you look at the article, I was actually pretty impressed. If impressed in a good way, because I always tell my clients, we're not here to stop cyber attacks. It's impossible for that to happen. We are here to limit the exposure. If you look at the Ace Hardware article, they have about 5,000 network devices, servers, network devices. Out of the whole shebang, only 1,200 were affected. That's only 25%.
Yeah.
And if you read about that, a day later, they were 50% back up and running.
They identified like the core 200 servers they needed within a day and had them up and running. Like that was
that.
Yeah, that was
it's amazing. Good. That is the proper method of cybersecurity, and that's exactly why we're here. It's not about, we're going to protect you. No, it's when that happens within 24 hours, you should start being operational. For example, they mentioned their local vendors at the stores. You can still operate. Don't worry. The main servers are being brought up, the shipping, all that. But they can still do business. And that's a perfect example of where I feel cybersecurity worked.
Yeah, I agree. Just to go back to your point, I don't think you should necessarily judge a company 100% on whether or not they get breached, because the honest truth is, and this is why I love having cybersecurity professionals on the show, honest truth is we're all going to get popped sooner or later. Like, it's just inevitable. It's a numbers game. And so I think the judgment call is exactly as you need to say, how do you respond, right? How transparent you are, how, it obviously looks like Ace Hardware made plans. Like, they had a plan here. Like, nobody goes and says, oh, crud, 20% of our environment's down. Next day, we're up and running by the seat of their pants, right? Like, there was some planning done here. And they obviously, even to the point where they were able to identify sort of what's the bare minimum we need to get back up and running. The article went on to say they're starting to warn their stores, right? Like, hey, we understand there's still disruption. You're going to get phishing attacks that, from hackers who are jumping on this saying, hey, trying to impersonate Ace Hardware to steal money. Like, this felt very, there was a chaotic component, but it felt very organized in the response. That was the takeaway I had too.
Yes, I felt they were extremely prepared. The fact that they were able to send communications out to the stores regarding phishing attacks, which is common after an attack. You're going to have every single Joe Schmo trying to get your money. But they had proper training in place, communication in place. And that comes up when you talk about cybersecurity, that really encompasses a cybersecurity solution. It's not just trying to prevent things. It's even after the fact. Who do you communicate with? What things are in place? You have to have those plans in place. It's not just throw tools, antivirus. It's not just that. It's even the human component, which I think they did a great job on.
Yeah, there was no way to automate that, like, response and communications, right? You have to tweet. I agree 100%. I've seen a lot of bad breaches, and we talk about them. Isaac, I think we've even ranted about a couple of them. Like, this was obviously somebody was doing almost gross negligence, right? Like, another story came out last week and tying into this, the whole SolarWinds fiasco. That kind of dropped last week. 3 years after the fact, right? The SEC did a huge investigation. So for our viewers, 10-second synopsis of this. This is how you don't handle cyber attacks, FYI. 10-second synopsis of this. SolarWinds ran a popular software used in government and government subcontractors, and honestly in the corporate IT environment as well, called SolarWinds Orion. It was like a network discovery management tool, and it basically allowed you to manage these giant networks that these companies and DoD and government agencies have, where they have thousands of routers and servers and switches. Like that's really hard to keep track of. Man, they kind of automated a lot of that. Well, the SEC has been digging into that because they got popped back in 2020. It was bad. It was really bad. Like we lost national secrets bad, and to foreign adversaries most likely. And the SEC was digging into it over the last 3 years, and they basically came out and said, hey. Specifically, they identified this chief information security officer, but there was sort of a general, you were grossly negligent, like beyond the pale, and you are a publicly traded company. These risks were material to your stock offering, which means it was material to your investors. We're coming after you for fraud. And like I've read some of the initial filings on that, and obviously we're going to find out more when it goes to court and things come unveiled, right? But doesn't look like there was proper planning, doesn't look like there was proper risk management. It looks like on the surface what the SEC is alleging for that particular instance was there's someone in the position of that chief information security officer that didn't have the background or knowledge to run that position. And that's sort of seems to be what they're alleging. Night and day difference to this, though. Night and day difference to this.
But I think you bring up a very good point. The difference is also when you talk about negligence. I know you mentioned this because I do watch your show. Once in a while, you do mention that. When you talk about negligence, people think I have insurance also. It's like I'm covered. Yeah. Not with negligence. And that's where I think the SEC and all these things with SolarWinds is because there's negligence. I think with Ace Hardware, the difference is you see how fast they responded. And I think, do you know they have something really put into place? It's not just about, it's how fast they can get up and running. Mm-hmm. The fact that they're already up and running a day later, they had a kick-ass, yeah.
I saw how many people there. I didn't realize how many people worked for Ace Hardware Corporate, like 13,000 people. Mm-hmm. That is a lot of inertia to work against to move anything quickly. Like that was insane to me.
Right. So to me, that's just a difference in examples of a well-prepared plan versus, unfortunately, even some of the well-known companies, they get hit.
Yeah. So ransomware, there was a brief minute here, like towards the end of last year, beginning of this year, where there was a little bit of, I won't go on the record and say anyone specific, but I was seeing murmurs and sort of a kumbaya that, ransomware is not viable anymore. It's going downhill. The hackers are moving on to the cloud. And then it felt like right around May, the bottom fell out and everybody started reporting being ransomware. I mean, the government of Nova Scotia, we had the Department of Energy. Obviously, we're talking about Ace Hardware, MGM casinos. Like
Australia had a massive one last year in healthcare. Oh my God. Brought down the whole healthcare in Australia. That was a massive hit.
And so let's talk about this for a second. Insurance, you brought it up. So I want to point to the MGM casino. Did you kind of read their public statement after what affects their bottom line? Because I believe they're publicly traded, correct? MGM casinos, I think they are, or they have a shareholders meeting of some sort.
I don't have that much information.
I don't either, but I do remember that they released like a shareholders note, basically. So that's why I thought that. And long story short, they said that whole month fiasco. So again, I'm going to recap this. A few months ago, MGM was down for the better part of 2 weeks to a month, partially or fully, because a bunch of ransomware actors took off their core systems online. They said they took $100 million loss. They said insurance should cover it out, but they weren't expecting it to reconcile to the end of the year. And they still that affected them badly. Like just because insurance is paying out the damages doesn't mean there was any long-term consequences that were measurable in economic damage, right? Like that was a big freaking thing. The amount of bad PR they got,
reputation. You can't put monetary value on reputation.
No, or employee well-being, right? Like that was stressful. I'm sure they had some attrition. Like I would be surprised if a chunk of their IT staff just up and quit.
Right. I'll give you an example, which is, again, I can't divulge names, but I know of a oncology center where they were hacked. Fortunately for them, they only were hacked for $32,000 in Bitcoin. Now, the reason for that was
32,000 Bitcoin for a second. I was like, what?
Yeah. It's like, I'm like 32,000. It was like nothing. $32,000. It's like, seriously. And the CIO actually said they didn't know what they had. There was literally 150 patients waiting for care. And if they paid it for 32,000, they just paid it. But like MGM, what they know what they have with MGM,
Oh,
they
they
took
had them.
millions.
They had them by the balls. Like, if I could be a
Right?
little class,
Yeah.
they absolutely did. And MGM didn't pay. To be fair to them, as far as we can tell, MGM did not pay.
Right. They said that they had backups. They have everything. It took them time. It was probably cheaper. They took the hit, but it was probably cheaper for them to rebuild everything in those 3-4 weeks. Again, it all depends on who gets you.
It's also what I'm noticing the trend for. So I don't actually know the name of this company. A colleague of mine, though, told me about a client of his that's a manufacturer. And so let's bring it home to our audience. The majority of our audience don't work for Fortune 500 companies or multi-$1,000 employees, right? They look for the SMB space, employees of 25, 50, maybe upwards in the low hundreds, like, or even smaller. Like, so let's bring it home to you guys. Like, so a colleague of mine was telling me about a manufacturing facility that had a floor and they got ransomware. Well, what the hackers did was they exfilled everything before they ransomware. They took copies of everything and put them in their privately owned cloud accounts so they could go and parse through it at their leisure. And that gave them enough leverage to open up negotiations with the floor manager. That foundry was part down and they didn't let anybody know for 3 months. 3 months. They were running off pen and paper, wigging out, like band-aiding things, trying to make sure they can keep, orders coming in. The floor was only operating at like a small fraction of the capacity. And I was told that small foundry, which I think it was like under 20 employees, according to my colleague, they wanted $300,000 in cryptocurrency. They negotiated with them back and forth for 3 months, and they settled, I think, for about $55,000. But why would they go through all that, right? Wouldn't it be quicker just to rebuild everything from scratch over a 3-month period? Yeah, probably. But the problem is A, nobody wants to admit, like, you think, oh, I wouldn't care until it actually happens to you. Nobody wants that to get out. And these criminals know that. Like, they will absolutely use that to their advantage.
I think what people also assume is they have backups. And they're like, oh, yeah, I have backups, not a big deal. MGM had backups, but not all the backups are equal. A lot of times they will wait 3 months to infect your backups. So you can't even go back, to your backups. It's all encrypted, ransom. That's it. You're gone. To bring your point, people think all these ransomwares, they attack larger corporations like the MGMs, the Ace Hardware. One of my clients that I onboarded was a small mom and pop dentistry. He was hit. He was like, oh, I don't care about, technology. Everything was paper, but he did use technology, e-scripts, all these things. They wanted about $50,000 in ransomware. He was debating, again, a small guy, old timer, small shop, dentistry. He was debating, should I keep my company open? It's like, do I even want to pay the money? It's like, sometimes it depends on the size. It's just too much for you. And the aggravation and dealing with it, he was asking me, what should I do? I'm like, let me take it over. Let me negotiate. We helped him work through it. He has a full cybersecurity implementation, but he's in business. But before that, he was debating, is it even worth it anymore?
Coming back. Let's pause here for a second. I'm going to do a quick promo. So for those of you who are wondering, okay, this sounds scary stuff. What the heck am I supposed to do about it? Totally valid question. I'd honestly question your judgment if you weren't asking that question right now, or if you didn't already know the answer. So in the effort to help, we're going ahead and offering a free ebook on how to do cybersecurity essentials for yourself as a business leader. It is a DIY guide to building a cybersecurity program based on NIST, which is the sort of best practice in the United States standard. So if you want to go ahead and help yourself to that, it's free, no charge, no commitment. Just scan the QR code that's popped beneath here, and I'll leave that there for a few seconds longer while we're talking. But again, this is a free ebook on how to build your own cybersecurity program based on NIST best practices. Scan the QR code below, or I believe the URL. Yeah, it is. The URL is also listed. You can just type that in as well. I'll leave this up for just a second, Isaac. So, but in the meanwhile, yeah, I mean, a lot of people are probably asking themselves, how would they get my name? Why would they bother targeting me? Like, I'm not a big company, and that's a fair question. And I think the honest answer to we need to bring up here is they're not targeting you. They're just casting as wide a net as possible using automation tools and well-established procedures to see who they catch. They hack first, figure out who it is later. That's what I've been saying. Would you agree with that?
I would. And I think part of the hacking is it's not direct hacking. It's as you mentioned before, phishing scams. They just send out emails. If you respond, they know they got a live one here, and that's how they take it to the next level. It's like, hey, I need XYZ. You answer. The fact you answered itself,
Mm-hmm.
you're a live bait.
I still remember we do some pen testing on the side, and I still remember showing someone kind of a light bulb went off when I showed them. I get you to click a phishing email. I can extract your password and your MFA, like the thing that's supposed to prompt your phone. You click yes to log in. That's sort of was the gold standard and still is. Like you should. Disclaimer: you absolutely should use multi-factor authentication. We are not saying you shouldn't, but I was able to show them like I got you to click a phishing email. Now I can log in as you, whether or not you have MFA, and you saw like the color grade out of their face. Like it's that easy, yeah. And that's what the criminals do in a lot of cases. They have basically made this so easy for them that they can do economies of scale. And that's kind of the big thing I think of that when I go and tell people and they look at me and they say, how have things changed compared to 4 years ago? They commoditized. Like they figured out how to automate this stuff and make tools and sell ecosystems. Like it's a full-fledged cottage industry now.
It's like with Bing AI, the whole AI thing now, it's like,
yeah.
it is scary now. You can actually take, I can send you a video call and ask you for XYZ. It's like, you would never know. It's like,
Have you
it's
played,
just getting.
side note, have you played with the new ChatGPT 4, the DALL-E integration they put in there? They merged them together. It's interesting.
I'm planning to, because I have certain projects coming on that I'm like, okay, let's try that, but yeah, it's a lot of it. You both and I both know AI is a very big part of our business. It's like, how do you automate these things? Whatever you want to do, but don't forget, bad, people will do the same thing. They use the same technology against you.
Yeah, and unfortunately, what's the saying? A few bad apples spoil the bunch. We're seeing that on the defensive side, which is there are the majority of responsible business leaders, whether in healthcare, finance, whatever, realize they have to do something, and they're doing their best. I am seeing that, but there are a few bad apples that are just grossly negligent, as we talked about before. And what we're seeing is on the enforcement side, right? Like the powers that be, that nobody wants in their business, nobody wants anywhere near them, are starting to take notice. And the wheels of government are always slow to move. I don't think that's a shocker. But last year we saw, and I know you're in healthcare, so you've had HIPAA for years, and that's got a whole other implication with insurance and all that fun stuff, patient care. Maybe WEMS if you're an accountant, WEMS if you're a car dealership, somebody who does huge amounts of volume and transactions and monetary things, you're absolutely a target. And the federal government noticed with the new FTC safeguards. They basically came out and said, we're not going to tell you what the consequences are yet, but if we find out you were negligent, you get popped, we're going to come after you somehow. And I work with publicly traded companies. The SEC is doing the exact same thing now this year, starting in December currently. I don't think it's been pushed back yet. I don't think I'm starting to wonder if it will be. A lot of times with the SEC stuff, they usually announce a start date, and then everybody knows it's going to get pushed back 1 or 2 more times. This one, it's getting right to the wire. The live date's like in a month. And basically, they're telling publicly traded companies, if you get hacked, you've got 4 days to make a public statement on a Form 8K with the SEC and Federal Trade Commission. Like, that's
egg on your face.
I know.
On your face.
It's like 4 days. Imagine being the guy that says, I have to make this digestible to my shareholders. Like,
something I find value in that, because there's so many times we have organizations that just sweep it under the rug. Like, you do get people are hacked, and it's like, oh, not a big deal. No, now it holds you accountable. And you and I both know where a lot of these leadership, they just ignore it. They sweep it on the rug.
No, it's expensive, right? It's expensive to deal with it. Nobody's saying it's not. Like, it is. And there is a price component to this. There's also a expertise level, right? Like, it's like we saw the SEC. Like this whole thing against SolarWinds. They're part of what they're insinuating is the person in charge of running this stuff was not qualified or didn't make what they would consider reasonable assumptions for it. So you got to find the talent. And the other thing too, let's crap on ourselves a little bit here. Tech guys, right? And they work with leadership. A lot of leadership are used to the tech guy going deep into the weeds, right? Like their eyes kind of glaze over and go, "Oh, that guy's he's different," Like he's not talking. That's not how like a lot of the C-level executives of these companies communicate. They communicate based on value, upon monetary gain, about strategic
the ROIs. That's really important.
Yeah, and so finding that person a lot of times that can communicate and translate all this technical jargon into ROI. This is what we need to do, strategic initiatives,
Mhm.
breaking it down to business common sense. That's a tall order. There's not a lot of people right now that can do that. That's why we have this huge gap for cybersecurity professionals.
Right. What's one of the CEOs once approached me, basically saying he would love to have cybersecurity, but like you mentioned, it's freaking the cost. It's just like and then you have to hire the professionals and the personnel and the offices rent, and he starts adding every little cost. And when he was like, I'd rather take a hit. And I'm like, but that's not how you should operate.
Well,
There,
and it's not just you, right? Like you're wounding other people because it's usually not just your data that's impacted, and that
it's
stuff
yeah.
is around forever. Like you're not making a decision in a vacuum. That's kind of, I think, the crux. Like you're losing. So in the case of the SEC's things, they're telling SolarWinds, your shareholders were negatively impacted, right? You impacted people beyond you. In the case of my
And by the
business,
way, they're responsible to their shareholders.
correct.
It's not right. It's not just like, oh well, I did bad. No, you actually have responsibilities.
Yeah. And I don't know where this train ends, right? Like I do see there's some logical loop like fallacies here of like, the kind of world we live in, every business being responsible for the treasure troves of data it has, because a lot of times they pick that stuff up inadvertently. Like I don't know where this train ends, but I do know right now, based on common sense application of the law, which I've talked to several attorneys and I've worked with several different professional groups, you are personally as a business responsible for the data that is under your management, whether or not you're aware of it. And when it gets impacted, you've got to notify and let the people who were impacted know, and they can seek relief. There's some stuff by most state law, like I'm in Ohio, right? One of the things is if you have over, I think it's like 1,000 people, you've got to go and make a public record. You've got to let them know, and credit monitoring is sort of baked into the cake, right? Like that's the minimum you can do as far as that. But then they can turn around and sue you. Like they do have that right. Um, I think this is fascinating because the biggest legal person on YouTube, Legal Eagle, as far as I'm aware, I think he is the biggest lawyer for him. You know, one of his main areas of practice are data breaches, suing people on behalf of data breaches. Like he advertises that in the front of every one of his videos. You've been impacted by a data breach. You need, I think it's like he's like employment law stuff. Like he is all in on that.
Well, that's one of the benefits of, I shouldn't say benefits, but one of the outcomes of FTC is they're saying that opens you up for your clients to now sue you. So in the past, it was more like your insurance will take it over, not a big deal. We did our best. But now with all the legal requirements, it's now you have legal obligations. Once you fail that legal obligation, you are now non-compliant with the government itself, and that opens you up now to additional lawsuits.
Yeah, I think they're taking the same road as seatbelts, right? Like if you look at American history, seatbelts weren't always mandatory in most states, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it was an encouragement campaign, and there were slowly building consequences campaign until it became you get in a car accident and you weren't wearing your seatbelt and the person next to you dies, like you can be held personally liable for that, right? Like that's where we're moving towards, and I think we're about midway there. We've moved past from the hey, you should do better to the okay, let's start cranking up the heat. Frog in the boiling pan kind of deal, right? Like, let's start cranking up the heat a little bit. That's a bad analogy. The frog never realizes the heat goes up. That's a bad analogy. Take that one out. That's the whole point of that.
But it's pretty sad. It's costing the industry billions, and the government has to step in saying it's enough. It's enough. We gave you the chance to take care of this yourself, but we're not. And a lot of organizations are just letting it sweeping under the rug. But it's costing other parts billions. And the government, again, the government gets involved because there is taxes that pay for half of this stuff when we talk about the financial losses, and they have to jump in there and help out. It's billions.
Yeah, this is going to get dicey too. I mean, I don't want to bring up too much on this because this is not the point of the show with the current world situations that are going on, right? Like obviously kind of a more riskier time and a lot of tension. The thing I always get worried about too is cyber warfare is sort of considered broadly on like to a certain level the appropriate way to respond when someone does something that you don't like. So and we're seeing these criminals, statistically speaking, especially the ones that are financially motivated, they're not operating from inside our borders. They're coming from countries outside of the U.S. In my case, I'm the United States. You're United States. But countries into extradition treaties. We pick on Russia a lot because Russia basically has an unofficial policy, allegedly, that if you're a criminal and you're targeting people, as long as you don't target Russian interests, you're free to do
You're good.
You're good. I mean, that's the world we're moving into. So I think it is in the best interest. I'm not one for more like gigantic amounts of regulation. I think it's only makes sense in certain scenarios, but understand the need to pressure the economic, basically the powerhouses of our economy to take this seriously because that is a strategic interest to us as a country. Like that's a little depressing to think about, but I mean, people have eyes. Take that as you will.
It does trickle down. So it's not just when you talk about MGM. Think just that case, even Ace Hardware. You're talking about what, 13,000 employees? What was the
13,000. MGM had more than that. I think MGM was like,
right? So
yeah.
Ace. But now, if they, it's not just that. It does trickle down, and it affects the communities you live in. It affects everything because now they're out of a job. They're not working for, let's say, 3 months, whatever that. If they're paying them or not, I don't know. But in the worst case scenario, if it's they're not going to get paid, they're going to have to go on government assistance. It's just it's a cascading effect, and that's why I feel that unfortunately you do need sometimes legislation to kind of force people to do the right things, even though we don't like government oversight. Certain things, areas make sense.
I
just
don't know
because
what it looks like either, to be clear, and I don't think you do either. Like nobody has cracked that nut. Like we're all
right.
trying to figure out what that would look like a common sense thing. And I've talked to people in the Fortune 500 space. I've talked to mom and pop shops who do like personal IT. Nobody has a good idea of what to do. But we know we need to do something. So I'm going to kind of put in your thoughts, right? Like thinking about this for a second. I think that every business, big, small, whatever, we've kind of identified this is a problem. And the other thing I wanted to bring up too, and you mentioned Ace Hardware and MGM, the B2B section of that, right? Like they have vendors. There are people whose businesses depend on Ace Hardware staying in business.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens when the bills don't get paid, right? Like they can't write the checks because the accounts payables down, right? This is a cascade effect, as you mentioned. But small businesses, proactively speaking, I think it makes sense for them to go ahead and start taking initiative now because it's kind of obvious we're not going to have that comprehensive, this is what you must do golden standard anytime soon, right? Like it really is sort of you need to start taking your own risk. You need to start managing it. You need to be proactive about it. You need to do common sense, all these things. For those who are tuning in today, Isaac and I both, Isaac, you're out in New York. What part of New York are you again? Remind me.
I'm in the Rockland County, a little out New York City area.
Okay, and I'm out of Columbus, Ohio. So literally Columbus, New York map is in the middle of Ohio. Like it's the one city. It's like right there. But working with partners like us, and this is not a show where we make shameless plugs for ourselves, right? But looking at partners like us makes sense on a lot of cases. Like obviously do your due diligence, look into the quality of the partner, but finding those industry experts to give you that insight, especially on the smaller business side where you can't afford to hire that guy. It's $200,000 a year plus benefits, right? Like that makes a lot of sense to me. Would you agree with that? Like just on the surface?
I do, and I think also it's not just $200,000 a year for a CTO you're hiring, plus also the support staff underneath that.
Yeah.
Finding the right partner eliminates a lot of that type of expenses by kind of focusing on people with the expertise to guide you through these type of scenarios and situations.
So Isaac, let's go ahead and I'll let you make a shameless plug. If someone wanted to work with you about this kind of stuff, right, where would they find you?
You can always email me, Isaac at caretechnologygroup.com. You can go to www.caretechnology.com. On there, we have a contact me page. You can schedule a 20-minute free session. We can have a first-time appointment to get to know you, who you are, what's your business like, and then like I said, it's not really a plug. It's just how you basically get in touch with us, so we can actually get to know you. Because the key thing is a good fit. We want to make sure that you are a good fit for what we're trying to achieve over here. We like to know what you're trying to achieve as a client. Like, what are you expecting? And then we try to kind of make that work together.
I'm in a very similar boat. So for me, I had the benefit of being the host of the stream, so I get to have my fancy QR code up here. There's a QR code there to our calendar. Same exact deal as Isaac. You can schedule a free, no strings attached, no commitment consultation for a cyber strategy session. Basically, we recognize, I think Isaac, you agree that every business is a little different, and part of evaluating risk is evaluating the uniqueness of each business, which is where these cyber strategy sessions come into play, because you might not be super susceptible to ransomware, but you could be susceptible to a business email compromise attack, or to a supply chain issue, or to some kind of phishing impersonation problem, right? Like getting an understanding of where you should put your focus on is sometimes the first step of defeating this problem.
I think you and I are very similar in how we operate, hence we get along very nicely, is we both create solutions for the problem. So for example, when you come, if after my first time appointment, I do always recommend all my clients to do a cybersecurity risk assessment, always. You know why? Because you don't have to use me as a client, as a vendor. I'm here to provide you what is your risk. You're empowered to make that decision of how you want to proceed. You can say, hey, I want to go that way. That's fine. You have the knowledge now. And that's what I try to do with my clients is give them the knowledge. Knowledge is power. You have the knowledge of how you want to operate, how you want to proceed. And then if you want to work with us, great. We'll customize something for you, which I think this is where like our operations, how we do cybersecurity, it's not buying, out of the box antivirus. Okay, you're good.
Norton everywhere. Norton everywhere.
Yeah, it's like, no, you're good. No. Everything is customized based upon your risk. And that's how we operate.
Yeah, I like to say is like a little analogy. We're the opposite of the stereotypical used car salesman, right? Like pushy sales, nobody likes it. So the whole point of this is, you're empowered to make the decision. If we're a good fit, and you think we both think we're a good fit, absolutely, I want to work with you. But if either one of us doesn't feel comfortable with the other, it's probably not going to work out anyway. It's best to part ways as friends from the beginning.
Exactly.
That's I think that's the best way to do this kind of stuff. So, all right, well, we're at time here for today. Isaac, thank you so much for joining, man. I always appreciate talking with you and getting your insight. My name is Logan. Let's do a quick extra one more time introducing ourselves. My name is Logan Edmonds. I'm CEO of Tabernacle Technology Solutions based out of Columbus, Ohio.
I'm Isaac Koenig, CEO of Care Technology Group based out of New York.
Stay safe out there, guys, and have a great rest of your day. And it is Friday, so have a great weekend.